Today we are in the Senate chamber here in the State House and wanted to spend just a few minutes talking about one of my favorite lighting fixtures here in the building. This is the chandelier in the Senate chamber. And this piece is original to the building from 1859. It was, as with many or most of the lighting fixtures here in the building, was done by the company Cornelius and Baker out of Philadelphia. They were sort of the lighting company of the mid-19th century in terms of lighting fixtures for grand buildings like this, state houses, large homes perhaps, country manors, plantations, those sorts of things as far as that goes. So this is an interesting piece, the chandelier here, for a few different reasons. It's a beautiful piece, but interestingly enough, all these were gas chandeliers, gasoliers when the building first opened. When electricity came to the State House, for some reason, it's not entirely clear to us, this chandelier was not electrified. So that rendered it perhaps somewhat obsolete, although it is still beautiful to look at. And there's also a little bit of talk that at the time, all the sort of nooks and crannies around the gilding, leaves and other things on there made it very difficult to keep clean. So eventually the Sergeant-at-Arms had it taken down, and we're not entirely sure why. And we're actually not sure what happened to it, what the story was behind it. It disappeared for a long period of time. And then not long before they were starting to look at the restoration here in the building in the early 1980s, late 70s, early 80s, this thing all of a sudden turned up. It had been crated up in a wooden crate. It had been taken apart, but all the pieces were there, and it had been stored down the street here, and it just turned up. One day someone sort of stumbled across it. And so out of the blue, we had this beautiful original chandelier again. So it was conserved, it was restored, obviously electrified, and put back up when the Senate chamber was restored here to its mid-19th century grandeur. This would have been what you consider, I guess you would call it a stock piece at the time from Cornelius and Baker. There's nothing specific to Vermont that you'll find on this chandelier, which is different than the house chandelier, which does have some very specific Vermont pieces, including some of the figures, the Greek slave figures that are on there, and our coat of arms repeated across the bottom of it. But the really interesting thing about this chandelier, I think, the neat story about it is the theme of it. If you look at it up and down, there's a lot of different intricate details on here, and if you kind of start and work your way up from the bottom, along the lower rung there are horses with fishtails with cherubs riding them. These are meant to be seahorses that are being ridden around on each of the arms there. And sort of the middle part of the next layer up, you'll find a sea god, Poseidon, Neptune, pick your sea god of choice, but you can make out a figure holding a trident. Looks like they're getting ready to spear something below them there. Above that, as you go up, there are water lilies on there, and there are water lilies in different places throughout it. And at the very top, there are what one can only assume are seahorses again. You can only see the front half of the horse and not the fishtail, but in sticking with the theme, those would be seahorses as well. So it's always been sort of interesting to us and makes me chuckle a little bit that here we are in the only landlocked state in all of New England, and we have a maritime-themed chandelier in the Senate chamber. Now, there could be a lot of reasons for this. Again, it is a really beautiful piece. We certainly do have a large and beautiful body of water here in Vermont with Lake Champlain running along our western border. So it's entirely possible that there was some connection to Lake Champlain when they looked at this piece. It's entirely possible that they just said this is a great chandelier and maybe the price is right. So we don't know the whole story behind that, and I rather suspect, unfortunately, we never will. But it is an amazing piece in the collection, an amazing piece in the building here. Certainly adds a level of elegance and beauty to this space here in the Senate chamber, just as the smaller pieces hanging around the building in terms of lighting fixtures do, and our larger chandelier in the House chamber. But lots of nooks and crannies, lots of little details to see in this, all or mostly all related to the water in some way. But if you find yourself in the House chamber, I would encourage you to take a quick look. If you find yourself in the balcony of the House chamber, you'll have a great bird's eye view. But take a look not only at the pieces that we've talked about and looked at today, but again, there are a lot of other little intricate details here on it related to figures and faces and all kinds of things. So a really neat, a really interesting piece with a bit of a mysterious story to it in terms of why did it come down and where did it go before we found it again and put it up, but also why was this chosen for this space here. So we're happy to have it no matter what the reasoning, and it does certainly add a level of elegance to this space.
Hello, I'm Deanna González, and I represent Winooski and a bit of Burlington. And this week before Town Meeting Week has the State House really thinking about Town Meeting Week and how to report back to folks at home, as well as crossover date. So some folks know this and some folks don't, but there is the date where the House needs to be finished with all of its bills to send to the Senate, and the Senate needs to be finished with all of its bills to send to the House in order to have it be possible that we can continue to work on it and potentially have them pass by the end of the session. And so in that, I'm on Housing, General, and Military Affairs Committee. So this committee does a wide variety of things, hence the general. So anything that doesn't fit into something else comes to our committee. And so one of those things that is in our committee is Indigenous Peoples Day. And so there has been a push over the years to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples and that this is their land that we are on, and how to do that. And one of the ways is really acknowledging a day and having that be a state recognized holiday. So for the past, I think 6 years, we've had governors who annually say, maybe it hasn't been 6 years, something like that, annually say, yes, this is the day. However, putting it into law is something that can really honor our past and our present. And so that's one thing that we're working on in committee right now.
Hello, I'm Representative Robin Chesnut-Tangerman from Middletown Springs, representing Tinmouth, Middletown Springs, Paulet, Wells, and Rupert. And I want to talk about two different topics today. First is a bill that my committee is working on. I serve on the Energy and Technology Committee. And we are really working on the nonpartisan issue of how to extend broadband into underserved parts of the state. And our approach is a threefold approach in this bill. The first is to use the system that we already have of the Public Service Department giving grants to telecom companies to go out into underserved areas, but to provide more funding for that. Hopefully make it more robust and increase the rate of acceleration. The other is a study to look at electric utilities becoming broadband providers, which has been done in some other states, mostly with electric co-ops, so rural areas. I think there's a lot of potential there. There are also a lot of challenges, primarily because electric utilities are highly regulated monopolies, and broadband is a lightly regulated, federally, highly competitive system. So those are some challenges to overcome. And the third approach is working with the community concept, communications union districts like EC Fiber and Central Vermont Fiber, to assist communities in doing what we as a state and what the commercial carriers have not done for them, which is to set up high-speed communications on their own. And we're looking at a toolbox of ways to help with that: technical assistance, bonding authority, regulation, streamlining regulations, things like that too. So taking three different approaches, trying to move them all forward and see which ones work, and they probably will all work in different areas, different applications. Of course, as always, the devil is in the details. Things like what speeds are we working toward, and what are the trade-offs in aiming too high and not achieving build-out into the difficult-to-reach areas, or keeping the threshold low, in which case you get what you ask for, and trying to find the balance there that best serves Vermonters. The other thing that I want to, and we hope to vote that out of committee perhaps by the end of this week, and it'll move forward this year. The other bill that I want to touch on is a longer discussion, and what we're really looking for in the next year is not to move the bill, but to have a robust discussion about ranked choice voting, which is simply a concept It's been used in some foreign countries, in New Zealand and Australia for 2. Maine adopted it last year for some elections, and our bill is actually very narrow too. It would be primary elections and federal positions, congressional offices. But the concept is, actually I'm going to back up. The impetus, my personal impetus, is I think probably you. I have certainly had the experience of voting for someone I don't like because they're the least worst choice. And I really want to vote for someone I want rather than the person that I dislike the least. And the calculus in there is we also want our votes to count. We don't want to throw away our vote, have it be a symbolic vote or a protest vote. We want it to actually count in a productive way. And ranked choice voting allows that because what you do is on the ballot you are able to vote for candidates in your order of preference. So you would vote, this person is my number 1 choice, this person is my number 2 choice, this person is my number 3 choice, and so on. When ballots are tabulated, if no one candidate wins a majority vote, then the lowest performing candidate is knocked out, and those persons' votes are eliminated, and on those ballots the vote goes to the next to the number 2 choice, and then votes are recounted, and perhaps that will push somebody over that threshold into the majority. If that doesn't happen, you repeat the process and the lowest performing candidate is crossed out. Those votes are reallocated by voters' choice, and then it's recalculated until there is a winner, which is essentially what a runoff election does, except it's not a 3-week process, it's a 1-day process. And really the only drawback that I see to it is that it's different. And we are all creatures of habit. We like the systems we understand. We don't trust things that are new that we don't understand. It's not more complicated. The jurisdictions that have been using it had no trouble with it. It was adopted in Burlington for 2 elections and then rescinded, and I would say that the reason there was not dissatisfaction with the process, but ultimately down the road dissatisfaction with the candidate who won. And that to a certain extent was blamed on the process of choosing that candidate. That's part of the longer ongoing discussion. But to me, this holds a great deal of promise in not restricting candidates to those who are best funded, those who belong to the dominant political parties. It really opens it up to the people's choice by broadening options for viable candidates. And in light of that, I think it really promotes democracy. So I would like to hold this discussion with all parties involved and have it be a good, honest, robust debate. Thank you.
Hi, I'm State Senator Dick McCormack. I represent the Windsor County Senate District. Windsor County, the Rutland County town of Mount Holly, and the Windham County town of Londonderry. I serve in the morning on the Health and Welfare Committee and in the afternoon on the Appropriations Committee. The Health and Welfare Committee, of course, the ongoing issues are trying to make health care more affordable and available. And then also the ongoing issue of opioid addiction. And we continue to work on those. We have some other issues that have come up this year. One of particular interest is a proposed constitutional amendment to clarify that in the Vermont Constitution that women control. Women are the defining authority over their own reproductive functions. And There are those who would say, well, that's not necessary given Roe v. Wade, which says that under the United States Constitution there is a right to privacy, and that the right of privacy, if it applies to anything, would of course apply to one's own body and one's own reproduction. But Roe v. Wade, there's no guarantee at this point that Roe v. Wade will remain, or will remain as powerful as it is. The Supreme Court reconstituted in recent years, and as likely to be further reconstituted in the future, could overturn Roe v. Wade altogether, or could just sort of redefine it and reinterpret it so as to make it less of a protection of the rights of women. So in anticipation of that, there's an effort to amend the Vermont Constitution. I had at one point hesitated to support the amendment. I certainly support the policy, but I thought in general you shouldn't legislate through the Constitution. The Constitution deals with basics. However, a man does not walk the same road as a woman. And the question of how basic is reproductive autonomy, which I as a man might understand thoroughly as an intellectual principle, what it's like as an experiential reality, is something where I think women know things that men can't touch, that we can't know, and I think it's appropriate to defer. I have heard in no uncertain terms from women that this is not just a matter of opinion. This is a matter of existential reality. And so I will be supporting that amendment. I think it likely will come out of the Health and Welfare Committee. The Appropriations Committee, I had an interesting conversation with a fellow from Finland last week who said Europeans tend to think of themselves as living in a community, and they think of taxes as one's share of the communal effort. And they're happy to hold up their end because they benefit from membership in the community. I responded somewhat jokingly, yeah, Americans consider taxes to be money the government steals from you. And there is a real hostility to paying taxes in America. Probably less in Vermont than in many other states, but it's still here as well, such that the so-called powerful Appropriations Committee is not that powerful because we don't have the money necessary to govern well. And that's sort of what we're dealing with right now, is that we've got to, if you add up the likely expense of everything that we really ought to be doing, it's a higher number than our total budget. And the total budget's pretty high. It's $6.1 billion of Vermont money. That's pretty daunting. But nevertheless, we are confronted on the Appropriations Committee with a parade of people who make very powerful arguments that they ought to be getting a big boost financially. And the only way to give one group a boost, if you don't raise the taxes to pay it, is to take it from someplace else. And that's actually what I'm going to go do right now, is go take my seat in the powerful Appropriations Committee and decide who to inadequately fund today.
Hi, I'm Kari Dolan. I'm a new first-year representative from Washington 7 District, representing Waitsfield, Warren, Fayston, Moortown, and Duxbury. And I'm assigned to the committee called the Natural Resources, Fish and Wildlife Committee. And one of our major priorities right now is to fund the Fish and Wildlife Department. The Fish and Wildlife Department does an incredible job managing our fish and wildlife for all uses, for fishing, for enjoyment, for hunting, and yet much of their budget is dependent upon licenses, sales of licenses, both fishing and hunting licenses in particular. And we've seen the actual decline in those licenses, meaning that there's a decline in revenues for this department. And we've been wrestling with this issue. How do we maintain the importance of these programming to support our interests in having a healthy, vibrant outdoors for all of us to enjoy? So that's one of the issues we're tackling, is how to maintain good service, good wildlife for everyone who enjoys the outdoors. So please stay attentive to this issue, stay involved, and look forward to hearing from you.
Hi, I'm Michael Sirotkin. I'm a senator from Chittenden County. I live in South Burlington. And I'm chair of the Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs Committee. And it's been a really busy week for us right now. We're dealing with two very large bills. On the floor of the Senate, we passed a bill to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2024, and we got a strong vote out of the Senate. And we're in committee, we're working on a housing bond bill, and it's still preliminary, but we're hoping to raise as much as $50 million to produce housing, both workforce housing, affordable housing, to address the big problem of housing in the state of Vermont. We hear every day from a whole range of people, from homeless advocates for homeless people to the business community, that housing is one of the biggest issues and problems facing our state today. And we wanted to approach it in a big way. The governor a couple of years ago did a $35 million bond, and everybody tells us it's so successful that we said, why not reload? So we're going to do it again, hopefully. We're still working on it in committee, but hopefully within a week or two, we may have some progress on it. So it's been a big week for us in the Senate.